Yep. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to talk about this past week of practice. So I'm really interested to hear your questions. Excuse me, let me pull down the shade. Okay, so I'm really interested to hear how things went with your practice. So what are the questions? What are the little problems that came up? What are the areas of curiosity, etc.? Let's see here. So, but before we get into your comments, let me just give a 1-minute review of what we covered last week to just kind of refresh everybody. So, we discussed Vipassana, a form of Vipassana that Shinzen Young developed called See, Hear, Feel, which is based on Mahasi style noting Vipassana. Okay, great. Well, so what is that? That's this whole idea of like a sensory focus with this quality of divide and conquer, right? Like, so we have the see component, the hear component, the feel component, and then this was also a noting technique, or rather a labeling technique. So we learned to label those experiences. Right, so that's basically it. How was practice this week? What questions are coming up for people?
I had a couple questions about it. In terms of the practice, it's easy to do. Well, I shouldn't say it's easy to do. It's possible to do kind of in any place. Like you mentioned before, you can do it while you're driving. Yep. You can do it while you're doing pretty much anything, as long as you can see, hear, and feel actively.
Right.
That said, for the 30-minute practice, is it necessary for that time to be a specific sitting practice, or can it be done in other situations? Like, I found it easier to do it sometimes when I've been, say, doing the dishes or swimming or things like that. But I understand that the idea of it being a sitting practice is also useful in terms of developing that practice. So I was curious about your thoughts on that.
Sure, this is a very good question. Thanks for that, Dan. Okay, so all right, so this is the way I would come at it. Is first off, doing the practice is what really matters, and so you can do it while washing the dishes, while swimming. That's excellent. So basically, I would say that the answer is yes. You can do it in any posture, under any conditions. And then I'll also say that there are particular benefits to the formal seated posture where you're kind of pushing up the crown of the head, everything's in line. So there are particular benefits to that, and it's worth cultivating that. And I would advise trying to make that a part of your practice. But then now also to come at it from exactly the opposite way, doing the practice while walking, let's say in a formal practice setting where you're not going to be doing anything but just walking meditation, that's fantastic. And that has benefits that sitting doesn't have. Also, doing something like doing the dishes and doing see, hear, feel, that actually has benefits that the formal seated practice does not have. A practice like that really helps you integrate it into life. So in a sense, what I would like to convey is doing the formal seated practice is important and has a very particular and inimitable benefit, but there's lots of benefits to doing it in other postures and other situations as well.
So in essence, keeping the practice well-rounded and making sure that none of those get neglected, and emphasizing probably the idea of having non-zero days where it's like at least doing it in some way every day.
Absolutely, that's right. Really try to make it really consistent. And then something else comes up. So the way I like to think about the formal seated practice is that's what potentiates your day of informal practice in motion, right? So that's like another, I think, helpful way of coming at it as well.
Awesome. Thank you for clarifying.
Yeah, gladly. All right, Tim has a question here. So my first day went really well, incredibly concentrated in choiceless open awareness. Then for my second day and onward, my brain figured out shortcuts. Noting often became a choice that drove awareness rather than vice versa. I also had much more mind wandering as I attempted to work on maintaining choicelessness. So now, Tim, I don't know if you're comfortable speaking up, but I'd actually like to ask you some questions. I don't quite know what noting.
Sure, no problem.
Great. Noting became a choice that drove awareness rather than vice versa. So explain to me what you mean by that.
So I would often, I just felt like I would hear something. There would be something. Maybe I heard it, but then I would feel like maybe I was actually at the time focused on my breath, but I would feel like, well, there was just a startling noise, so maybe I should note here.
Yeah.
And I would note here and be kind of focused on it, and then that drove me to hear the next thing rather than maintaining just openness to whatever the next thing was, whether it was a hear, a see, a feel, anything. It kind of felt like my brain was, I wanted to take control and find the next see, hear, feel, rather than experience something and then figure out what I was experiencing.
Yeah, right. Okay, let me see if I'm getting this right. So I don't know, there's this kind of like bearing down and trying to follow, or well, you know what, reiterate it one more time. What is it that you were doing that was kind of bothersome or that you didn't like?
It was, I felt like basically I was directing what I was going to experience rather than being open to what I was experiencing and noticing that.
Okay, man, all right. There's a couple different ways to come at this. So basically it's not a problem in the least what you're reporting. And okay. Also, I would suggest to you that the appearance of choice is not choice, and that is actually equally choiceless. So, like, for example, so if you were to just sit there and choicelessly be aware of what was arising, or by contrast, what was to happen was what you reported, which, okay, you start doing the see, hear, feel thing, and then you kind of get, let's just call it a little bit, I don't know, neurotic about following what's coming next and like kind of like trying to get in there in a particular way. That's what's arising for you. That's every bit as choiceless.
Okay. I didn't have that next step of meta awareness about it, and maybe that's where I need to take that.
Sure. In a sense,
that's helpful.
Yeah, in a sense, I think when it happens the next time, notice how there's not any choice around this. Like if you're thinking, oh, okay, now I'm getting like really all like kind of like hyper focused on the noting itself, and like, now, okay, this one, I noted this here thing, and now my attention is more so on here. Notice how that's just simply what's arising in your consciousness. And how, for example, a practice that I recommend and that I do myself is I'll sit there and I'll say, let's have this be different. Let's have something other than this arise. And it is always this. So no matter what it is, that's it. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, all right. Okay, good report. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. Hold up. And then I'm attempting to work maintaining the choicelessness. Yeah, so I just say just simply notice, and that's good enough. So if you notice that you get pulled into something that doesn't seem choiceless, okay, just notice that. If it is in fact choiceless, then notice that and be at ease with it. That's what I recommend.
Okay.
Good enough. Thanks.
Now, I would just add, I find that's similar to the feedback I had in previous meditation when I felt like I was, when I was focusing on the breath, and I feel like I would take control of the breath rather than, and it seems like it's very similar to the feedback.
Right. And now there is this kind of like clenching down and kind of like almost worrying about, am I doing the practice right? And what you want to do is you want to note that. Like, what does that feel like? It feels like tension in the body. So feel. Maybe there's an image thought that arises with, oh, like I need to be following this. Or maybe there's some like auditory thinking and you just note here. So you deconstruct the kind of lack of ease around how the practice unfolds.
Okay. That's helpful.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. All right, let's see here. So Sam says, Tim's comment rang true for me as well. I'd make it a point to feel something so that I could note it instead of observing myself in a more detached way. To be clear, I think it's fine. Like, play around with this. Investigate the process however you stay, such that you stay engaged. Okay, let's go to Linda. You raise your hand.
Hi, I wanted to ask a question. What I was noticing was that I would be taken off by a thought with an image and wake up enough to come back and say,
Yeah.
oh, that was hear and see, and
Fantastic.
go on into this conversation of, well, where was feel? You didn't feel anything when you were doing that. And I just, to simplify, I should just, because I started calling it thinking.
Yeah, to be clear, that's not a problem. In the Mahasi style of noting that Shinzen based his system on, you just note thinking, right? Whereas in Shinzen's, I would say, kind of optimizes for sensory clarity. And then also, so for example, thoughts are either image thoughts or they're auditory thoughts, right? And so with the verbiage that Shinzen offers, he kind of helps you see, like, gain more sensory clarity. And I think further objectify, because if you see thinking as just like an image thought, it's even further objectified than just thinking. That's a long story that I just gave you there. Mm-hmm. But if you just note thinking, it's not a problem in the least. So it sounds good. And frankly, it sounds like you have pretty good sensory clarity, that you see the thought and then can catch it and say, aha, okay, that was an image thought. Okay, that was an auditory thought, see or hear. Fantastic.
Yeah. I'm really glad to get back to Shinzen's techniques.
Good.
They're good. And thank you for the homework. Because I've been wanting to have a scheduled half hour.
Sure.
So thanks.
Sure. Thank you. Okay, cool. What else is coming up for people?
So I have a note. So actually, when I started doing it, I wasn't a huge fan of it. But I twisted it a little bit for my own personal practice.
Okay.
I think, and so I kind of took this approach where. So first off, when I was doing it, when I was doing the noting, I was kind of in this open awareness state, and then I would see something, and then I would make the internal note. But I didn't feel like I was gaining any insight into the actual thing that I'm seeing. So I then kind of shifted my practice to be like more starting in getting to a state of samadhi, and then when I made the note, really making that my object of attention, and like seeing. Not just making the note, but actually like trying to focus on what the sensations making up that thing that I'm noting were.
Good. That sounds really good.
And that resonated with me a lot more. And that being said, that might still be a part of like the normal practice of like see, hear, feel. From my understanding, it was like one extra step, but I really liked it when I approached it that way.
Okay, so I can make a couple of comments. So first off, you mentioned something about doing a concentration practice before the see, hear, feel practice. That's highly recommended. Obviously, we've only gone over one technique so far. So I think it is next week that we go over the breath work, concentration practice. So, but it's a very traditional way of approaching Vipassana. It's the first half of your practice is a concentration practice, which kind of like juices things up. It gets things a little bit more flowing, you have a little bit more of this kind of penetrating concentration, and then the vipassana goes better and it kind of lands harder. So that's good. And then the other aspect that I think, and I just want to make sure I'm getting it right. You said that you were trying to notice what made up the sensation. Is that what you were saying that you were doing? Yeah.
Yeah. So
Right.
instead of just noting it, also kind of directing my attention to the actual experience itself.
Definitely. Yeah. The noting, okay, well, so the labels just, like, I like to think of the labels as just this, like, you're quizzing yourself. What did I just experience? Okay, feel. What did I just experience? See. And then when you get in that habit, your mind, it just like stands to attention and it pays attention. So to be clear, the labels are not important. It's just a trick to get you to be mindful, although it works really, really well. And yes, and it's helpful to actually like pay attention to what the actual phenomenon is made of, which is made of emptiness, nothing, as far as I can tell. Good, so good report. All righty, anything else coming up for people?
I had, I guess, similar experience to maybe some of the other commenters about just, I guess, trying not to judge or, kind of overthink the practice.
Sure.
And I think it's particularly related to some previous things I'd done, maybe some of the Mind Illuminated and other stuff where, early on in my sessions, I would be pretty good about kind of awareness and a lot of external awareness. And then slowly it would shift to a lot more internal mental chatter, kind of hear in and see in and stuff that I would traditionally associate with mind wandering and kind of being distracted, which historically is, not, I don't want to say, not good or bad, but, not ideal. And so it was a little hard to not feel, or to feel like I was doing it right. And there was some discussion in the Telegram thing about just as long as you're noting those things, it's fine. But it was still a little bit hard to get out of that sense that, oh gosh, it's better early on when I'm hearing out and seeing out and these other things, and I don't like the hear in and see in as much, or it doesn't feel as good. So that's some of what I was going through.
Yeah, well, it just takes a while to get used to a new practice. And also, like I mentioned in the Telegram group, your older established practices always kind of like come in and invade your new practice, which is not really a problem.
Yeah, cool.
Good. Cool. All right. Anything else before we move on to the new material?
I just wonder, when the gentleman said state of samadhi, is that what you're calling concentration practice?
Yeah, concentration, samadhi are basically synonymous.
And mind illuminated?
That's a book by Dasa. I'll write it in the chat so you can see it. The Mind Illuminated. And yeah, it's a pretty well-known book on concentration practice, or technically samatha vipassana, which is largely just a concentration focus.
Thanks.
Yep, sure. All righty, cool. So let's go on to the new material. Okay, so today we're discussing metta, loving kindness. The first thing that I'd like to do is read this little paragraph I wrote about heart practices. So a little for some context. So a heart practice is something like metta, loving kindness, compassion practices, tonglen, if you happen to be familiar with that. And then a wisdom practice would be traditionally something like self-inquiry or vipassana. So see, hear, feel is a wisdom practice. Okay, good. So the way I think of the path is that you need to develop both heart and wisdom through the respective practices. I actually think that heart practices are more important than the wisdom practices. The heart practices heal your mundane psychology and make life pleasant and practice much easier. They are also possibly more useful just in daily life. they are more in line with daily life. They make insight practices come much more easily and integrate more health, like in a more healthy way into your life. And so let me say a little bit about that. So when you do insight practices, and your insight practices will help your daily life. You'll become more integrated, you'll pay better attention, you'll have insight into yourself and into others. But insight practices are often disturbing because they shock you out of delusion in a certain way. And that can be very disrupting. And it's really important to have a strong basis of a heart practice like loving kindness, etc., to kind of smooth out those bumps. All right. So very good. So what I'd like for us to now do is we're going to do loving kindness meditation right now without any instructions, predating it at a minimum. So straighten up, push the crown of the head up towards the ceiling. And now physically smile. And now think of a beloved, either pet or person in your life that you have an easy, uncomplicated relationship with. So again, an uncomplicated, loving relationship. Now smile, and now see your beloved smiling back at you. And now say to yourself silently or out loud, may you be happy. May you be happy. May you be happy. Wishing happiness for this beloved person or pet. And now really notice what this feels like. And now come back and kind of ring the bell of metta. Say the mantra, may you be happy. May you be happy. And you can use another mantra or another verbalization if you have a preference. Whatever reminds you and whatever brings you back. And now you see your beloved object, person or pet. May you be happy. May you be happy. May you be happy. And now stay with it. Subtle is significant. It might not be just a raging fire of loving kindness. It might be subtle, hard to find, kind of flitting and disappearing. But we need to work with what we got. So stay with it a little bit more. May you be happy. May you be happy. Okay, good. That is the practice that we're going to be doing. However, now we're going to do another kind of micro meditation that will further contextualize the practice. We're going to reflect on the following statement. All I have ever wanted is happiness. All I have ever wanted is happiness. So just repeat that to yourself a few times, contemplating it very loosely. All I have ever wanted is happiness. All I have ever wanted is happiness. And now we're going to change the contemplation to all beings just want happiness. We're going to repeat that a few times. All beings just want happiness. Reflecting on that. All beings just want happiness. And now for a third contemplation. I am just like all beings, and all beings are just like me. All we want is happiness. And now noticing how blameless that is. It's innocent and good and natural and common to all beings to want happiness. And now wish that to yourself. May I have happiness. May I have happiness. So wish that to yourself. May I have happiness. And of course, it's so natural. That's all I've ever wanted. May I have happiness. And now, reflecting, may all beings have what they want. May they have happiness. Okay, good. So wrapping that up. So the first meditation was metta, but just on the easy to love object. And that's the kind of metta that I'm going to teach in this class. And then the next contemplations that we did, those were just to kind of sensitize yourself to the fact that we're all in this together, that we all want the same thing. And also it's an encouragement and it's a permission giving that you view your own desire for happiness as wholesome and blameless. And I would say that that's the reason why you're all taking this class, is to become happier and also thereby to benefit others with your happiness.